Captain David Chen stood at the edge of the landing platform, looking up at the impossible sight before him. The Valerian capital city floated in the sky like a crystal mountain turned upside down. Towers of pure glass and metal reached toward the clouds, connected by bridges that glowed with soft blue light. Ships moved through the air without sound, their hulls reflecting the twin suns that hung in the purple sky. David had traveled 3 months to reach this world. His small Earth transport ship looked tiny next to the massive Valerian vessels that filled the spaceport. Other species from across the galaxy had come here too. He saw the tall, thin Arctans with their silver skin. The round Bolean traders rolled past on their mechanical legs. Everyone seemed to know where they were going except him. Human Captain Chen. A voice spoke behind him. David turned to see a Valerian approaching. The alien was taller than any human, with skin that looked like polished stone. Patterns of light moved under his skin like circuits. His eyes glowed with a soft white light. "Yes, that's me," David said. "I am Advisor Ren. The High Council is ready for you." The Valerian's voice sounded like music played through crystal. "Please follow me." They walked through the floating city. David tried not to stare at everything, but it was hard. The Valerians had built things that Earth science said were impossible. Buildings that bent space to be bigger inside than outside. Gardens that grew in mid-air without soil. Children who played with toys made of solid light. "Your people are very young," Advisor Ren said as they walked. "How many years since you left your home planet?" "About 50 years for real space travel," David answered. "We've had colonies for 30 years. "Interesting." Ren nodded. "We have been traveling between stars for over 3,000 of your years. Our civilization is very old." David could tell this was meant to remind him of Earth's place in the galaxy. Humans were the new kids. Everyone knew it. Most alien species treated humans like children who had just learned to walk. They reached a huge building at the center of the city. The walls were made of something that was clear like glass but rang like a bell when the wind touched it. Inside, the ceiling stretched up so high that clouds formed near the top. The floor was covered with patterns that seemed to move and change as David watched. "The council chamber is this way," Ren said. They walked down a long hall lined with pictures that moved like windows. David saw the history of the Valerian people. Their first cities. Their first ships. Their first contact with other species. Wars fought and won. Peace treaties signed with dozens of alien races. It was the story of a people who had ruled this part of the galaxy for longer than human civilization had existed. The council chamber was round with seats arranged in a circle. 12 Valerians sat in chairs that floated above the floor. Each one wore robes that changed color like the surface of soap bubbles. Their skin patterns moved faster when they were thinking, slower when they were calm. In the center of the circle was a raised platform. David walked up the steps and stood in the middle. He felt very small surrounded by all these ancient, powerful beings. "Welcome, human Captain Chen," said the Valerian who sat in the highest chair. Her voice was older than the others, like wind through mountain caves. "I am High Counselor Vera. We understand your people wish to help us with our current problem." "Yes, ma'am," David said. "Earth received your message about the failing city ships. We know our technology isn't as advanced as yours, but sometimes a fresh perspective can help." Several council members made sounds that might have been polite laughter. Their skin patterns flickered with what David guessed was amusement. "Tell us about this fresh perspective," said another counselor. David had prepared for this question. Human engineering grew from solving problems with limited resources. We learned to fix things when we couldn't replace them. We learned to find simple solutions because complex ones were too expensive. Sometimes this gives us a different way of looking at problems. "Different," said High Counselor Vera. "Yes, we suppose it would be different." One of the floating chairs moved lower. The Valerian sitting in it was younger than the others. His skin was brighter, and the light patterns moved faster. He wore robes of deep blue that shifted to purple and back again. A thin crown of living metal rested on his head. "And what makes you think," the young Valerian said, "that your primitive methods could solve what our greatest minds cannot?" Prince Kale, High Counselor Vera said in a warning tone. "No, grandmother, I think this is an honest question." Prince Kale's chair drifted closer to David. "This human comes from a species that has barely learned to leave its own star system. They use metal ships with chemical rockets like something from our ancient history. Their computers are simple machines compared to our quantum networks. Their cities don't even leave the ground." David stood quietly and listened. He had heard this kind of talk before on other worlds. "And now," Prince Kale continued, "they come here to help us. Help the Valerians, who were building star forges when their ancestors were discovering fire. Who were traveling through folded space when they were still throwing rocks at each other." Some of the council members shifted in their seats. Their skin patterns showed different colors now. David wasn't sure if they were embarrassed by the prince's words or agreeing with them. Prince Kale stood up from his floating chair. He was tall even for a Valerian, and the crown on his head made him look even taller. "I have studied human history, Captain Chen. Your people have been in space for 50 years. Do you know how long we have been building city ships?" "I don't," David said. 2,000 years. Our first city ship was launched when your people were still fighting with swords and horses. We have built over 300 city ships. Each one houses 1 million of our people. Each one uses technology your species cannot even understand." David nodded. "That's very impressive." "Impressive?" Prince Kale laughed. The sound was like breaking crystal. "It's not impressive, human. It's the difference between a star and a candle. Between an ocean and a puddle." The chamber had grown very quiet. Even the moving patterns on the floor seemed to have slowed down. "Our city ships," Prince Kale said, "use quantum crystalline power cores that fold spacetime to generate energy from the vacuum itself. They are guided by living computers made from crystallized thought patterns. They maintain themselves using smart matter that can become any tool or material needed." He paused to let this sink in. "Your Earth ships use metal engines that burn fuel. Your computers are made of silicon and metal. Your tools are shaped pieces of matter that do only one job." Prince Kale smiled, showing teeth that glowed like pearls. "And you think you can help us fix technology you cannot even pronounce the names of?" David felt all eyes in the chamber on him. He could have explained that human engineering had solved problems that more advanced species had given up on. He could have mentioned the dozen worlds where human thinking had found answers that alien supercomputers had missed. He could have talked about the Zayton plague that human doctors had cured when Zayton science had failed. Instead, he just said, "I understand your point." "Do you?" Prince Kale stepped down from his floating chair and walked around David like a predator circling prey. "I don't think you do understand. You see, Captain Chen, this is not just about technology. This is about knowing your place in the galaxy." The prince stopped directly in front of David. His glowing eyes looked down at the human. "Your species is children playing with toys they found in the dirt. You have been in space for barely a moment, and already you think you can teach older, wiser civilizations how to solve their problems. It shows a lack of respect that borders on insult." David met the prince's glowing gaze steadily but said nothing. "Perhaps," Prince Kale continued, "you should return to your little dirt world and leave real engineering to civilized species. Come back in 1,000 years when you have learned enough to have a proper conversation with adults." The silence in the chamber was complete now. David could hear his own heartbeat in his ears. Several council members looked uncomfortable. High Counselor Vera's skin patterns had turned a deep, angry red. Prince Kale smiled wider. "Unless you have something to say. Some brilliant human insight that our primitive minds have missed." David looked around the chamber one more time. He saw ancient beings who had ruled the galaxy for thousands of years. He saw technology that Earth couldn't build for centuries. He saw a young prince who had never been told he was wrong about anything in his life. And he made his choice. David nodded once to High Counselor Vera. "Thank you for your time," he said quietly. Then he turned around and walked toward the chamber doors. "That's it?" Prince Kale called after him. "No angry words. No defense of your primitive species. You're just going to walk away?" David didn't answer. He didn't turn around. He just kept walking. "Perhaps they really are as simple as I thought," Prince Kale said to the chamber. "Can't even argue their own case." The massive doors opened as David approached them. The sound echoed through the chamber like thunder. David walked through without looking back. Behind him, the chamber erupted in conversation. Some council members spoke angrily to Prince Kale. Others seemed confused by what had just happened. High Counselor Vera's voice rose above the others, sharp with displeasure. But David heard none of it. He was already walking down the long hallway, past the moving pictures of Valerian history, thinking about failing city ships and the problem that had brought him across the galaxy. The doors closed behind him with a final, echoing boom. David walked through the floating city for 2 hours before he found what he was looking for. The Valerian diplomatic quarters were in a tall tower that hummed with soft music. The building seemed to sing to itself as the wind moved through its crystal walls. Inside, Ambassador Talon was waiting for him. The older Valerian had been Earth's first contact with this civilization. His skin patterns moved slowly, showing patience and wisdom earned over many centuries. "Captain Chen," Talon said. "I heard about the council meeting." "Word travels fast," David said. "Prince Kale is young. He speaks before he thinks." Talon gestured for David to sit. The chair formed itself from the floor, adjusting to fit David's human frame. "His grandmother, High Counselor Vera, is not pleased with his behavior." David sat down carefully. "I didn't come here to cause problems between your people." "You didn't cause anything," Talon said. "Prince Kale has been causing his own problems for years. But tell me, what will you do now? Will you return to Earth?" David was quiet for a moment. Outside the window, he could see one of the failing city ships in the distance. It should have been shining with bright lights, but large sections were dark. Even from here, he could tell something was very wrong with it. "I came here to help solve a problem," David said finally. "That problem is still there." Talon's skin patterns brightened. "You still wish to help? Even after what Prince Kale said?" "What he said doesn't change the fact that your city ships are dying," David said. "And people are going to get hurt if someone doesn't figure out why." Talon stood up and walked to the window. His reflection in the crystal showed his skin patterns shifting to different colors. "Our best scientists have been working on this problem for months. Master Engineer Voss has 3,000 years of experience. Quantum tech specialist Nara can speak directly to our ship computers through neural links. They have tools that can see individual atoms and machines that can think faster than any biological mind. And they haven't found the answer yet," David said. "No," Talon admitted. "They have not." David joined Talon at the window. The failing city ship looked like a dying animal. Parts of it flickered with weak light while other sections had gone completely dark. "Would it be possible for me to examine one of the affected ships?" David asked. Talon turned to look at him. "You really think you might find something our experts missed?" "I don't know," David said honestly. "But I won't know unless I try." That afternoon, Talon arranged for David to visit the city ship called Morning Star. It was the first ship to show problems, and also the worst affected. Nearly half of its systems were failing now. The transport that carried David to the ship was small and fast. The pilot was a young Valerian named Kree who clearly didn't understand why a human was being given access to their most advanced technology. "You are engineer?" Kree asked as they flew toward Morning Star. "Sort of," David said. I fix things. Fix things. Cree looked confused. But Valerians do not fix things. When something breaks, we replace it with something better. David found this interesting. What if you can't replace it? Why would we not be able to replace it? Cree asked. We have factories that can make anything. What if the factories break? Cree thought about this for a long time. That would never happen, he said finally, but he sounded less sure than before. Morning Star was huge up close. The city ship was over 50 miles long and housed nearly 1 million Valerians. Its outer hull was covered with patterns that should have been glowing with energy, but many of them were dark or flickering weakly. Inside, David met Master Engineer Voss. The ancient Valerian's skin was darker than the others, and his light patterns moved very slowly. He had been building and maintaining ships for 3,000 years. So you are the human who thinks he can solve our problem, Voss said. His voice sounded tired. I'm here to learn about your problem, David corrected. Whether I can solve it remains to be seen. Voss seemed surprised by this answer. At least you are honest. Come, I will show you what we are dealing with. They walked through corridors that stretched for miles. The ship was like a floating city, complete with parks, schools, and homes. But everywhere David looked, he saw signs of the growing failure. Lights that dimmed without warning. Moving walkways that stuttered and stopped. Children playing in parks where half the artificial trees had stopped growing. It started 3 months ago, Voss explained as they walked. Small things at first. A power fluctuation here, a system glitch there. We thought it was normal wear from our long journey. How long has this ship been traveling? David asked. 47 years, Voss said. We are on our way to establish a new colony in the Andrus system. But now we may not make it. They reached the heart of the ship. The engine room was a vast chamber filled with machines that hurt David's eyes to look at directly. Crystals the size of buildings grew from the floor and ceiling, pulsing with energy that seemed to bend space around them. Rivers of liquid light flowed through transparent tubes between massive quantum processors. This is our primary power core, Voss said. It draws energy from the quantum foam itself, converting virtual particles into real power. The entire process is controlled by our main intelligence, a living computer grown from crystallized thought patterns. David had read about Valerian technology, but seeing it was different. It was like magic made real. No wonder Prince Kale thought humans were primitive. Compared to this, Earth technology really did look like rocks and sticks. Where exactly are you seeing the failures? David asked. Voss led him to a bank of monitors that displayed more information than David could process. Streams of data flowed across screens in languages that looked like living artwork. The quantum resonance is becoming unstable, Voss said. The crystalline matrices are developing harmonic distortions. The living computer reports increasing difficulty maintaining quantum coherence. David nodded as if he understood, but the truth was that most of these words meant nothing to him. Human technology didn't use quantum resonance or crystalline matrices. They used metal engines and electronic computers. Can you show me the affected areas? David asked. For the next 6 hours, Voss walked David through the failing ship. They visited power distribution centers where crystal networks were losing their ability to channel energy. They examined quantum processors that were having trouble maintaining their complex calculations. They looked at sections of the ship where the very walls seemed to be forgetting how to exist properly. David took notes in a small paper notebook. This seemed to amuse the Valerian engineers who followed them around. They used devices that could record everything and analyze it instantly. David's pencil and paper looked like something from a museum. What are you writing? Asked Engineer Nara, the quantum tech specialist. She was younger than Voss, probably only about 500 years old. David showed her his notes. He had drawn simple sketches of the machines and written down basic observations. Things like, power fluctuates every 47 minutes, and, crystal A7 dimmer than crystal A6, and, strange smell near quantum processor bank 3. Nara read his notes and looked confused. These are very simple observations. Sometimes simple observations are the most important ones, David said. But you are not measuring quantum field fluctuations or analyzing harmonic resonance patterns, Nara said. How can you understand the problem without proper data? I'm trying to understand what changed, David said. When did the problem start? What was different 3 months ago compared to 6 months ago? Voss overheard this and joined the conversation. Nothing changed. The ship has been operating normally for 47 years. Nothing at all. David asked. No new equipment installed. No crew changes. No route changes. No maintenance performed. Well, Voss said slowly, there was the routine maintenance cycle 4 months ago. And we did take on new supplies at the Delos trading station 5 months ago. And we adjusted our course slightly to avoid the gravity well of a dying star. But these are all normal operations. David wrote this down in his notebook. Can I see the maintenance logs? I suppose so, Voss said. But I assure you everything was done according to proper procedures. That evening, David sat in his small guest quarters reading maintenance logs on a Valerian data tablet. The device could have projected the information directly into his brain, but David preferred to read it the old-fashioned way. The logs were incredibly detailed. Every component that had been serviced was listed along with the names of the technicians who had worked on it. Every part that had been replaced was catalogued with its origin and manufacturing date. Every test that had been run was recorded with its results. David made more notes in his paper notebook. He drew diagrams showing which systems had been worked on and when. He made lists of the new supplies that had been loaded at Delos station. He tracked the course changes the ship had made. While David worked quietly in his room, Prince Kale was holding court in the royal district of the home city. News reports showed him laughing with other young nobles, making jokes about the primitive human who thought he could solve Valerian problems. I heard he takes notes with a pencil, Prince Kale told his friends. Like some kind of ancient scribe. Next he'll be rubbing sticks together to make fire. The news report spread across the Valerian communication network. Soon, millions of Valerians were laughing at the human who used paper notebooks to study their most advanced technology. But the laughter stopped when the second city ship began showing similar failures. The ship was called Eternal Dawn, and it was 3 days behind Morning Star on the same route. The failures started small, just like before. Power fluctuations. System glitches. Then they got worse. Master Engineer Voss contacted David immediately. Human Captain Chen, we need you to come to Eternal Dawn right away. David spent 2 days examining the second failing ship. He walked through the same kinds of massive engine rooms and studied the same types of impossible technology. He took the same kind of simple notes in his paper notebook while Valerian engineers watched with growing confusion. The pattern is almost identical, Voss told him. Whatever is causing this problem, it's affecting both ships in the same way. David compared his notes from both ships. The failures were indeed almost identical. Same systems affected. Same progression of problems. Same timeline from first symptoms to major failures. What about the other ships on this route? David asked. There are 6 more ships following the same path, Voss said. But they are all still several weeks behind us. David felt a chill of worry. If this problem was affecting ships in the order they traveled the route, then 4 more city ships and their millions of inhabitants were in danger. On his 3rd day aboard Eternal Dawn, David was examining the quantum processor banks when he noticed something. In his notebook, he wrote, "Smell stronger here than on Morning Star. Sweet, like flowers, but wrong somehow." Engineer Nara saw him writing and laughed. "You are documenting smells now? Captain Chen, these are quantum computers. They process information in 11 dimensions. Smell is not relevant to their function. David looked up from his notebook. On Earth, experienced mechanics can often smell problems before their instruments detect them. A burning smell might mean overheating. A sweet smell might mean a coolant leak. But these machines don't use coolant, Nara said. They use quantum field manipulation. Then why do they smell sweet? David asked. Nara paused. She had never considered this question before. I do not know. They are not supposed to smell like anything. That night, David called Ambassador Talon on the communication system. The connection was fuzzy because both ships were deep in space, far from any relay stations. How many ships are affected now? David asked. 3, Talon said grimly. Silver Wind started showing problems this morning. Master Engineer Voss believes the entire convoy is going to fail. What does Prince Kale say about that? David asked. Talon's image on the screen showed his skin patterns turning darker colors. Prince Kale says it proves that human interference has made the problem worse. He is calling for you to be sent back to Earth immediately. David was quiet for a moment. And what does the High Council say? High Counselor Vera has overruled her grandson. You may continue your investigation. But Captain Chen, people are starting to panic. We have 3 million Valerians on those ships, and they are all at risk. Whatever you are going to find, you need to find it soon. After the communication ended, David sat in his small quarters looking out at the stars. Somewhere behind them, 3 city ships were slowly dying. Somewhere ahead of them, 3 more ships were traveling toward the same fate. David opened his notebook and read through all his observations again. The sweet smell. The maintenance schedules. The new supplies. The course changes. The timing of the failures. He was missing something. Something simple that everyone else was overlooking because they were looking for complex solutions. David had learned long ago that the most important problems often had the simplest causes. But what could be simple enough that Valerian science couldn't find it, yet serious enough to kill their most advanced technology? He kept reading his notes until the artificial dawn lights came on in his quarters. Somewhere in his simple observations, written in pencil on paper, was the answer to a problem that threatened millions of lives. He just had to figure out what it was. David woke up on his 4th day aboard Eternal Dawn with an idea. It had come to him in his sleep, born from a dream about his grandfather's farm back on Earth. In the dream, his grandfather was explaining why the apple trees were dying, and the answer was so simple that young David had laughed. He dressed quickly and went to find Master Engineer Voss. The ancient Valerian was in the main engineering section, staring at displays that showed the ship's failing systems. His skin patterns moved with colors that David had learned meant worry and frustration. Master Voss, David said. I need to ask you about the supplies you took on at Delos Station. Voss turned to look at him. We went through those manifests already, Captain Chen. Everything was standard. Food, raw materials for the fabricators, replacement parts for routine maintenance. What about biological materials? David asked. Biological materials? Voss looked confused. We do not use biological materials in our ship systems. No, but do you have gardens? Parks? Living areas with plants? Of course, Voss said. The city ships house millions of people. They need natural spaces for psychological health. Can you show me the manifest for biological supplies from Delos? David asked. Voss called up the records on his data display. Here. We took on soil supplements, fertilizers, seeds for food crops, and some decorative plants that were popular at the trading station. David studied the list. Most of the items meant nothing to him, but one entry caught his attention. What are these Delos bloom vines? Flowering plants, Voss said. They produce very sweet-smelling flowers. Many of our people wanted them for their personal gardens. David felt his heart start beating faster. How sweet do they smell? Very sweet. Like concentrated nectar. Why do you ask? Where were these plants installed? Voss checked his records. Throughout the ship. Personal quarters, public gardens, recreational areas. They are very popular because they adapt well to artificial environments. Master Voss, David said carefully, I need you to show me exactly where these plants were put, and I need to check something in the quantum processor areas. They spent the morning visiting the locations where Delos bloom vines had been planted. David noticed that the sweet smell he had been tracking was strongest near these areas. He also noticed that the quantum processors closest to the plants seemed to be failing faster than the others. I need to take a sample of soil from around one of these plants, David told Voss. Soil. Voss looked at him strangely. Captain Chen, soil is just dirt and organic matter. It has nothing to do with quantum technology. Humor me, David said. Voss arranged for David to take samples from several different plant locations. David used simple tools, a small shovel and some glass containers, while Valerian technicians watched with obvious confusion. Now I need to look at these samples under a microscope, David said. We have quantum analysis chambers that can examine matter at the subatomic level, offered Engineer Nara. A regular optical microscope will be fine, David said. It took some searching, but they found an old optical microscope in a museum section of the ship. It was a piece of Valerian technology from several hundred years ago, considered primitive by their current standards. David prepared slides of the soil samples and began examining them. The Valerian engineers gathered around, curious about what the human thought he would find with such simple equipment. For the first hour, David saw nothing unusual. Just normal soil components, minerals, organic matter, microscopic plant roots. Then, in a sample taken from near the quantum processor banks, he saw something that made him stop. Master Voss, David said quietly. Can you look at this? Voss peered into the microscope. I see microorganisms. Bacteria, I believe. This is normal for soil samples. Look at the shape of them, David said. Voss adjusted the focus. They are somewhat unusual. Elongated. And they seem to be moving in organized patterns. They're not just bacteria, David said. There's something else. And I think they're eating your ship. David spent the next 6 hours examining soil samples from all over the ship. The strange microorganisms were present everywhere the Delos bloom vines had been planted, but they were concentrated most heavily near the quantum processor areas. I need to speak with someone who knows about Valerian metallurgy, David told Voss. They contacted Dr. Kellen, the ship's materials specialist. When David explained what he had found, Dr. Kellen was skeptical. Captain Chen, our hull materials and internal structures are made from quantum-bonded metals. They are essentially indestructible. No microorganism could possibly affect them. What if the microorganisms weren't trying to eat the metal itself? David asked. What if they were eating something else? Dr. Kellen looked confused. What else would they eat? You told me your quantum processors use crystalline matrices, David said. What are those crystals made of? Various rare elements, Dr. Kellen said. Quantum-stabilized compounds that maintain coherent energy states. Are any of those compounds organic? Dr. Kellen thought for a moment. Well, yes. The binding agents that hold the crystal matrices together are carbon-based polymers. But they are synthetic, artificially created. No natural organism could possibly recognize them as food. Unless, David said, the organism wasn't natural either. David explained his theory. The Delos trading station was known throughout the galaxy for its biological markets. They sold plants and animals from hundreds of different worlds. In such an environment, it was almost certain that different species would come into contact and sometimes merge. I think these microorganisms evolved at the trading station, David said. They learned to eat synthetic carbon compounds because that's what was available in the artificial environment. When the bloom vines were brought aboard your ship, the microorganisms came with them in the soil. But why are they only affecting the quantum processors? Dr. Kellen asked. David had been thinking about this too. What generates heat on your ship? The quantum processors generate significant thermal energy, Voss said. And heat makes chemical reactions happen faster, David said. I think these microorganisms can eat the binding compounds in your crystal matrices, but only when those compounds are heated to a certain temperature. The quantum processors get hot enough to activate the microorganisms. That would explain why the failures are progressive, Dr. Kellen said slowly. As the crystal matrices degrade, the processors have to work harder, which makes them hotter, which activates more microorganisms. It also explains the sweet smell, David added. I think that's a byproduct of their digestive process. Dr. Kellen ran quick tests on David's theory. Within hours, they had confirmation. The microorganisms were indeed eating the binding compounds in the quantum crystalline matrices, but only at temperatures above 340 Kelvin. How do we stop them? Voss asked. David had been thinking about this too. On Earth, we use electromagnetic fields to sterilize things. If you could generate a specific frequency that disrupts their cell structure without affecting your other systems, you could kill them off. What frequency? Dr. Kellen asked. I don't know, David admitted. That's going to take some experimentation. While Dr. Kellen and his team worked on finding the right frequency, David contacted Ambassador Talon to report his findings. Within hours, the news had spread throughout the Valerian government. High Counselor Vera called an emergency session of the High Council. For the first time in weeks, there was hope that the crisis could be resolved. Prince Kale was not present at the emergency session. He was aboard his personal ship, traveling to the affected convoy to see the situation for himself. When the news of David's discovery reached him, he refused to believe it. Microorganisms? Prince Kale said to his advisors. The human thinks our most advanced technology is being destroyed by tiny bacteria. This is ridiculous. But Dr. Kellen's experiments were successful. They found that an electromagnetic pulse at exactly 847.3 terahertz would kill the microorganisms without damaging any ship systems. The frequency was so precise that it had to be generated by the quantum processors themselves, adjusted to a specific harmonic that resonated with the microorganism's cellular structure. The fix was applied to Morning Star first. Within hours, the ship's failing systems began to stabilize. The quantum processors started working normally again. The lights that had been dimming grew bright once more. Prince Kale arrived at the convoy just as the repairs were being completed on all three affected ships. He demanded to speak with David immediately. They met in the main conference room aboard Morning Star. Prince Kale entered with several attendants, his royal robes shifting from blue to silver as his emotions changed. David sat alone at the simple table, his paper notebook in front of him. Explain this to me, Prince Kale said without greeting. How did you discover what our greatest scientists missed? David looked at the young prince for a moment before answering. Your scientists were looking for complex technological failures because that's what they understand. They used quantum analyzers and neural-linked computers and multidimensional scanning devices. And you used a pencil and paper, Prince Kale said with obvious skepticism. I used my eyes and nose, David said. I paid attention to simple things. When something smelled wrong, I asked why. When the timing of failures matched the timing of supply deliveries, I asked what the connection might be. Prince Kale sat down across from David. His attendants remained standing, unsure what to do. But how could you see what our technology missed? Because sometimes, David said, the answer isn't in the technology. Sometimes it's in the basic facts that everyone assumes aren't important. Prince Kale was quiet for a long time. His skin patterns shifted through several different colors as he thought. Our scientists have been trained to solve technological problems with technological solutions, he said finally. They never considered that the cause might be biological. Your people are incredibly advanced, David said. You can do things humans won't be able to do for centuries, maybe ever. But that advancement can sometimes be a limitation too. How so? When you can replace anything that breaks, you never learn how to figure out why it broke, David said. When you have tools that can see atoms, you might miss the big picture that's right in front of you. Prince Kael stood up and walked to the window. Outside, the 3 city ships were glowing with restored power, their millions of inhabitants safe once again. I mocked you, Prince Kael said. I called your people primitive. You weren't entirely wrong, David said. We are primitive compared to you. Our technology is thousands of years behind yours. Then why are you not angry with me? David thought about this. Because being primitive isn't always a bad thing. Sometimes it means you still remember the simple lessons that advanced civilizations forget. Prince Kael turned back to face David. What simple lessons? That problems usually have simple causes, even when the effects are complex. That paying attention to small details can be more important than having powerful tools. That sometimes the best way to understand something is to step back and look at the whole picture instead of focusing on the parts. Prince Kael nodded slowly. And that walking away from an insult can be wiser than fighting back. Sometimes, David said. Although I have to admit, I mostly walked away because I didn't have a good comeback. This made Prince Kael laugh. The sound was different from his mocking laughter in the council chamber. This was genuine amusement, with no cruelty in it. Captain Chen, Prince Kael said formally, I owe you an apology. I judged your species by our standards instead of trying to understand your strengths. Apology accepted, David said. I would like to make a request, Prince Kael continued. Would you be willing to teach some of our young engineers about human problem-solving methods? I think we have become too dependent on our technology and have forgotten how to think simply. David smiled. I'd be happy to share what I know. But I think you'll find that you already have everything you need to solve problems this way. You just need to remember to use your eyes and ears and nose along with all those quantum computers. Later that day, High Counselor Vera contacted David directly. The old counselor's skin patterns showed deep respect and gratitude. Captain Chen, the High Council has voted unanimously to request that Earth establish a permanent advisory presence in Valerian space. We have much to learn from your people's approach to problem solving. I'll pass that along to Earth, David said. Though I should warn you, most human engineers are just as impressed by your technology as Prince Kael thought we should be. Perhaps, High Counselor Vera said with what David had learned was a Valerian smile, that is exactly what we need. People who can be impressed by our achievements while still seeing our blind spots. 3 days later, David was preparing to return to Earth when Prince Kael came to see him one final time. The young royal looked different somehow. His posture was less arrogant, his expressions more thoughtful. I wanted to give you something, Prince Kael said. He held out a small device that looked like a crystal flower. It's a Valerian quantum communicator. It will allow you to contact us instantly from anywhere in the galaxy. David accepted the gift. Thank you. This is beautiful. Captain Chen, may I ask you something? Of course. When I insulted you in the council chamber, you could have argued back. You could have listed human achievements or mentioned other times your people helped alien civilizations. Why didn't you? David considered the question. Because arguing with you wouldn't have solved the problem that brought me here. Your people were in danger, and that was more important than my pride. Prince Kael nodded. I think that is the most important lesson of all. Sometimes the wisest choice is to walk away silently and focus on what really matters. Sometimes, David agreed. Though I have to say, it felt pretty good when the solution worked out. Prince Kael laughed again. I imagine it did. Safe travels, Captain Chen. I hope we will work together again someday. As David's transport ship pulled away from the Valerian convoy, he looked back at the 3 city ships glowing with restored life. Millions of Valerians were safe because someone had paid attention to a sweet smell and asked simple questions. David opened his notebook and wrote one final entry: sometimes the most advanced problems have the most basic solutions. Sometimes walking away speaks louder than shouting back. And sometimes being primitive is exactly what the situation needs. He closed the notebook and settled back for the long journey home, already thinking about what Earth's diplomats would say when they learned that humanity had just been invited to become permanent advisors to one of the galaxy's most advanced civilizations. All because a 19-year-old prince had mocked the wrong human at the wrong time.